All right, welcome everyone to our Bloomin PGC open mic night for May 2021. And we're excited today to have University of Maryland Extension with us. And our first speakers are Jonathan Kays and Luke McCulley, and they're gonna kick it off with some wildlife management advice and support for us. So I'm gonna turn it over to you guys. Thanks for being here tonight.
Okay, hey, thanks a lot. I'm actually a forestry extension specialist. I work out of Western Maryland Research Center, but I work statewide. And Luke is, you might introduce yourself. He is the
wildlife management specialist for University of Maryland Extension. I just joined on in a new position just last August, so I'm new and I'm learning a lot. And under the kind tutelage of Jonathan, who's been doing this for much longer and has a very good depth of experience in Maryland. I come most recently from California, so I'm learning a lot about the local wildlife management issues, and looking forward to sharing what I can and helping to support Jonathan in the Q&A.
All right, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Luke. So yeah, I've worked with deer and vole management specifically, as well as other types of wildlife for a number of years. And you know, we all have moved on in time. I may have to skip over some of the stuff I have, and because of time, but it's about 40 minutes of kind of covering a range of topics. And I put some resources in there as well that you may want to take a look at. I'm sharing my screen here, and I hope that you can see it. So does that look okay?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great.
I can see it.
All right. All right, so, and it's interesting to hear all your introductions, because, you know, you all have, you know, I talk with all kinds of audiences, rural landowners, as well as a lot of master gardener audiences, residential audiences. So my goal here is to kind of cover the landscape in terms of, and focus on some of the, predominantly on deer and on voles, but as well as groundhogs and things, and kind of give you a way of maybe looking at some of these issues, as well as what are some of the controls. And a lot of this is around this whole realm of wildlife damage management, and just understanding the first important thing is to identify, you know, the damage, the species responsible, understand the biology, know the alternatives, and know the law that's surrounding those species. So what I'm going to be doing in this presentation is I'm going to talk about deer a little bit, and then I'll talk about as in terms of identification or biology, and then I'm going to switch over to voles. So I'm going to kind of cover both topics kind of right up against each other. I've just found that this is a better way to kind of cover more species than to kind of just do one at a time. And then, you know, if you have questions, put them in the box, in the chat box, and maybe Lynn can feel free to interrupt me, and if I can you know, answer them there. Otherwise, we probably best to wait till the majority of them till the end. But identifying damage is important. What's causing it? You know, early detection for many of the problems you're having with, you know, deer and other things. The earlier, the better, and because the longer wildlife gets used to being in your area and doing what it's doing, the harder it is to get rid of it. And of course, you know, what's causing the damage. And again, if I was in a room with a bunch of you, I would ask you what these things are, you know, and this is deer up here on the top, you know, ate off the top of this corn, deer browsing on the lower left, buck rubbing here. You can see my cursor. And of course, a beaver. But I would ask you to look at these two on the right, because many times, you know, people confuse rabbit damage with deer damage. And basically, rabbit damage is the one on the right. They have, you know, incisors on the top and the bottom, so they make a nice clean cut. Deer only have them on the one side, so they basically, when they eat something, they rip it. So you get this characteristic of tearing of what you see on the left here. Now, of course, if it's, you know, many feet off the ground, you probably know it's deer, but in some cases you may have a rabbit problem and not realize it and think it is deer. So it's just one thing to look for. This is another thing. This is vole damage. This is actually, you can see the voles, basically it was snow here up until about this point, and they ate the bark underneath the snow. This shows you what they can do with a root system of a tree. This is a boxwood, and basically there's, you don't want to confuse, you know, voles with moles, okay, which is on the top left. But typically we have two species of voles, okay? They're called meadow mice meadow mouse. And the meadow vole in the bottom is the most typical one you see. It has a real long tail, which is a characteristic to tell. And a pine vole, which is a much smaller one, but is more subterranean and tends to live underground. These can be real problematic. And you can see what they can do. This is some boxwood shrubs. And typically, they're not going to eat woody tissue in the summertime. They're basically going to eat green stuff in the summertime. That's what they prefer. But if you have a lot of beds, and especially a lot of mulch is the big culprit, way too much mulch, they just love that habitat. So come September or so, they're going to start losing all the green vegetation. That's when they're going to start hitting the woodies. And I'll talk about trapping them out later and dealing with them, but that's when you want to get them before they're going into the winter and causing all kinds of damage with all kinds of crops, with herbs and everything else, trees, you name it. And you can see this is characteristic meadow voles on the top here. You can see the tunnels, okay? And they're going up under the foundation. Pine voles tend to have more, like they're more subterranean. You can see they have a hole just going into the ground. And but the pine voles, which will use the meadow vole tunnels. But the point is just learn to recognize these things. You'll see the tunnels, and you can find the frass. And again, I have fact sheets on a lot of this stuff, and I put that in the chat box to some of the resources that I have on these topics that you can use. And you can see this is from overwintering, basically, under snow, and the voles just went crazy around these residential environments, and they can do the same around many of your beds. So you want to get them in September when the vegetation is changing and before they take those high populations into the fall. And a lot of tree plantings have basically been succumbed to vole damage, because there were voles in a lot of these old pastures that you see here, and a lot of these old abandoned lots full of voles. And if you start getting down in the grass, you'll find them and see them down there. Again, planting trees in that without controlling them is kind of a waste of time. You're wasting your money. And you can see this little, it's hard to see these little tunnels under there, but just a couple other things. Again, a couple other types of damage you might see. On the lower right is some vole damage. You can see the tunnels. And if you have old pieces of cardboard or plywood on the ground, you pick it up, you'll see things like this. But also you'll see a lot of holes in the ground like this, and skunks very typically do that. They're looking for grubs underneath the ground. And again, don't confuse, voles, which are more of a grassland species and high grass, typically with moles, which will make these high, earthen tunnels like this. But moles are not going to really hurt you. You hurt your crops for the most part. They don't eat woody tissue, so they're looking for grubs and other things. So groundhogs, real problem. Anybody, maybe most of you have many problems with groundhogs. You can see this damage here on the right here. They've taken out part of this field, and everybody was probably going to ask me questions. What do you do about groundhogs? Well, honestly, you have to trap them and get rid of them. But you don't want to take them somewhere and drop them somewhere else. Actually, legally, that's against the law to trap and transplant wildlife without a permit from DNR. So, and it's not really humane either, because you're putting them under a lot of stress situations in a foreign environment. So we can talk about that a little bit later. For a lot of the critters you might have on your farms or in your back areas, and if you're not sure what they are, is to trap them. Mouse traps are great for that. Peanut butter. This is great for figuring out if you have voles or mice, the difference and things like this. Everhart traps can be used as well. Putting those mouse traps along vole tunnels like this and covering them usually works pretty well. They don't like coming out in the light, so you need to cover them with something. They like to be in the dark. So understanding the biology is important. The behavior, all those kinds of things are very important. Their annual cycles. And we'll talk about that. And what we're going to talk about here really first is for the biology and thing is I'm going to talk about deer for a little bit and then talk about voles. Okay. So, and a lot of things I want to say about deer are somewhat negative, but realize that deer are, contribute a lot of, positive quality of life benefits. They certainly bring in a lot of money to the economy for hunting, as well as wildlife watching and things like that. So I don't want to dismiss that, but they can become a real problem, like you see from this picture here under this old trampoline. So what do you do about that? Well, the thing about deer is they're extremely adaptive. Back in the 80s, even the wildlife biologists thought that deer would basically be eradicated. They'd leave. They wouldn't be around anymore because they would lose their habitat. But they didn't even understand how well the deer could adapt to the urban, suburban environment. So just a couple of problems, of course, with deer is, deer vehicle collisions. And I've worked with this in many areas of the state, and it's a big problem around the country. It's not just property damage; it's also loss of life and people having lifelong injuries. So there's a lot of work being done in this regard. But the other thing is Lyme disease. They're not direct result, but they certainly carry the tick, and the deer tick, which carries a spirochete, provide a blood meal as well as other animals do. And, they tend to transport and carry them around pretty much everywhere. And once they're in an area, it's very difficult to, of course, get rid of them. And you may have seen some of these 4-poster tick devices that are in some of the county parks now. They are basically corn feeders, and the deer stick their necks in there and on these rollers here with their pyrethrins there, and they kill the ticks. And they can be quite effective, but very expensive to operate, very expensive. So what is good deer habitat? Most people look at this picture on the lower right here and think, oh yeah, deer in the trees, they like the trees. Deer is really an early successional species. They like the vegetation close to the ground so they can eat it, and they have cover. And Maryland has the perfect landscape for it. This rural landscape on the top, but we see the same thing in many of the urban environments with brush and of course all the fertilized lawns and things like that. So and of course the habitat changes with the season, so that many of the food sources that are available in the winter go away, and that means that they come to other areas. So they'll come to your yards, a lot more in the winter perhaps than they will in the summer, when they could perhaps go other places. So this is a common question people ask is, how much do deer eat? Well, they eat about 3 or 4 pounds of vegetation a day. Okay. And you can take these numbers I have here and blow this up. But one thing I would recommend you do is take a black plastic bag, okay, and go around with a pair of clippers and start clipping off, tips of trees or chips of branches, and fill up that bag with about 3 or 4 pounds of browse, and see how much it takes to do that. And you can see why our woods are basically being decimated, and biodiversity is being decimated by deer because of overabundant deer. And this is what it looks like. You see this all over the place. They've overbrowsed the habitat. There's no vegetation there, all the regeneration. The habitat for wildlife is gone, and there's plenty of studies that document this loss of biodiversity. It always amazes me. People are concerned about biodiversity in the rainforest, but deer have just decimated in our backyards. And the reason is because deer, overabundant deer are a keystone species. And that's a species on which other species in the ecosystem largely depend, such that if it were removed, the ecosystem would change dramatically. And that's what you see here with this unfenced area on the right. The deer basically eating everything in the understory. There's the loss of all the habitat for all other types of wildlife, okay? But on the left, where it's been fenced, that vegetation's come back, that habitat's come back. So plant the seed that for those of you that are having problems with deer, fencing works, okay? And this is an example from Baltimore County. On the other side of that fence there's no deer. It was fenced out. This is where there's deer. So fencing can have a dramatic effect. And I'll talk about a couple different types of fencing that's available that you probably should look at. Just a quick example of deer population dynamics. Let's just say you have a deer herd with a 3-to-1 ratio of bucks to does, does to bucks, which is not uncommon, especially in populations that are hunted. And let's say you have a hunting season, you harvest half of the does and half of the bucks. And of course, you know, assuming each of those female deer or doe produce 1.3 fawns, and that's extremely conservative. It's more closer to 2. But in this case, you have 12 new deer. You add that to the 12 remaining, you add the same number of deer. So my point here is that I'm not a professional wildlife biologist, but in talking with folks, you know, you need to remove 40 to 50% of does in a population just to maintain the population from one year to next. So you can see how in your urban environments and suburban environments, deer are becoming extremely overabundant because there is no hunting in many cases except by automobiles, and basically these you know, you see 1 or 2 deer, so there's 2 to 3, 4 to 5, so on and so forth. So this is a you know, eye-opening to many people, and that's why many of these managed hunts, Howard, Montgomery County, and other areas that we really are encouraging counties to have managed hunts to reduce these overabundant deer to protect the environment. So anyway, that's on deer. A little bit about the biology of voles, okay? Voles are creatures of the tall grass. You know, they like the tall grass, they like the cover. On lawns, that's where you're gonna find moles. And, you know, moles, again, don't eat woody vegetation. They're eating bugs and you know, insects and things like that. So most of your vole problems are going to be in areas where you have grass or you have lots of mulch or lots of soft earth where they can tunnel in. And but you're going to have voles there too. And this is where, you know, knowing what the problem might be worth trapping some to make sure that you know what you got, or looking at some of the other resources so you can tell the difference. Just a couple things about voles. They're capable of dramatic population changes. So the meadow voles, which are the most common ones on the left, the longer tail, bigger body, 5 to 10 litters per year, you know, about 5 litters of young per litter. Pine voles are a little bit less productive, sexually active very soon. And again, the thing is they eat plant parts. They like green succulent vegetation. But come fall, when that runs out, that's when they go after your woodies. That's when they're going to hit your crops that you might have in many cases, all your roots and things like that. So you need to find ways to get rid of them. And typically that's going to be, you know, not encouraging rodenticides for most of the applications you have probably, but just a quick and dirty way is to use mouse traps with peanut butter and, you know, hide them along the tunnels and cover them and start trapping them out in, you know, around September when they're going to take bait. Most of what we know about voles comes from the apple business, apple orchards, especially up in New York and areas like that, where the threshold for the number of voles is extremely low, because this used to be an apple orchard and it was let go. They stopped herbiciding the strips with the trees. You can see there's 1 tree left, and stopped, you know, they regularly apply rodenticides on nurseries and things like that. So you know, it only takes a few voles to kill a tree. And of course that tree is expected to produce for the next 10, 20 years. This is a call to you as well. Those of you who have fruit trees, excuse me. And that kind of thing, you want to be very concerned about that. Your threshold may be very low for voles. And let's look at tree plantations. Of course, I'm a forester and I've seen many of these tree plantations basically be eviscerated or just totally killed from voles. In other words, there were voles there before. They weren't, you know, the trees are planted in the spring. They go through the summer quite okay usually because the voles are eating other things, and then come fall, they just hammer those plantations. And they'll do the same thing in residential landscapes where all of a sudden you notice all the trees are dying. Well, they've been dying since September when the voles have been working on them. So in this case, in many cases, had to nuke the site and replant the trees, and big loss. So I've done a lot of work with forestry plantings to make foresters do an assessment for vole presence and either treat them culturally or chemically, depending on the situation, or combination of both, to deal with it. Otherwise, you know, why are we wasting our money planting those trees? Groundhogs, just a few, everybody always asks about groundhogs. So this is just a few statistics about groundhogs. You know, 700 pounds of dirt digging out of a 20, 25 foot den. and consume a lot of vegetable matter in a day. So that could be out of your vegetable garden, out of your herb garden. And the breeding season's in mid-February, and they start emerging, and basically they start moving out. And again, there's no easy answer. In some cases, firearms are allowed. Firearms can be used, but in other cases, it's trapping and euthanizing. But a lot of groundhogs just don't go well with a lot of urban farms. I can tell you that. They cause a lot of losses. And they're typically an edge creature, so you're going to find them, and especially in a lot of urban environments where you have a lot of edge, and they're very resourceful. And of course, there are bombs that can be used, and other types of things that you can put in the holes, and there's a whole range of options. But many people have been thwarted with trying to get rid of groundhogs. It takes persistence. The biology of the pests relative to managing the problem is important. I think, how do populations respond when they're removal of animals in a given area? And that varies with size. And I mentioned this for deer and voles just to tell you that, when a lot of times with deer overabundance, but hunting programs and so on and so forth, the bucks tend to roam, and they're going to start to fill in a lot of those holes. So my point here is that if you are trying to remove deer with hunting and things like that, one season of doing that's not going to do it, because they're going to come in from other areas. So you're going to be kind of like this permeated approach, and after a while, you'll start to have a real impact, but it has to be a yearly effort. I think that's the point to be said. And in the case of voles, there's a lot of things that are positive for voles populations to increase, like you see here, immigration and so on, but also a lot of things that can be negative. And there's a whole list of items here in terms of predation, and I'll mention some of these items a little later on. One thing I would tell you about voles is that they will come in from other areas. So let's say you have a vole problem, you trap them out of a certain area. Well, if you're going to trap them, make sure you trapped out at the peripheral areas as well, because a lot of times they will come in, moving from other areas. That's what this graph shows you. And again, this comes from apple orchard work in New York. Even though the voles were, taken out, okay, after about 48 weeks, they reinvaded from adjacent areas. So just be aware of that. They will move in from other areas. So this is the good part. What are the alternatives, for deer and for voles? And I think I see somebody has their microphone on, I think.
So not next door in Leland's basement.
I think somebody needs to mute. Good. Okay, so let's talk about deer. I have a number of resources on deer management publications. Admittedly, some of these need to be updated, but the information in them is still pretty good with repellents and other things. And I'm just going to mention some of these things to you here. And when I talk about deer management, I tend to make it easy to understand by talking about wildlife damage management as kind of a combination of one of four areas. Population management, which is going to be typically hunting, but then you have fencing, managing the vegetation perhaps in some cases, and then using things like repellent and scare tactics. Okay, so let's look at each one of these. Okay, and the point I want to make is that for many of you in urban areas and with urban farms, realize that these non-lethal options, fencing, repellents, and vegetation management, 3 out of those 4 typically, don't deal with the root problem, which is overabundant deer. Okay, there's still too many deer. You're just pushing them off somewhere else. So, population management is going to come from traditional hunting, managed hunts. Deer contraception is not an option. I'm just telling you right now, I'm not going to get into it. It's just not an option, really. Of course, disease is an option, but we don't want that. We do see incidents of chronic wasting disease, but we really don't want to go there either. So my point for you that have a lot of deer problems is to make that known to your local government officials and encourage things like managed hunts on state and county parks and things like this, because that's going to be a benefit to the biodiversity overall, ecology overall, as well as to citizens in general with regards to vehicle accidents, Lyme disease, and everything else, as well as damage to landscapes or farms. So just a couple things about vegetation management, and really this is more about planting things that deer don't like. So if you're going to be putting in a landscape, or if you're a builder or something, for goodness sakes, if you're not going to be fencing off the area, and you have a overabundant deer and a lot of deer pressure, don't plant things that deer like, okay? And we have a fact sheet on resistance of ornamentals to deer damage, things they prefer more than others. Now that doesn't mean they won't eat the other stuff, but there's a preference list for them. So you can minimize the damage if you're going to be, don't plant rhododendrons and azaleas and yew bushes. That's like candy, okay? So unless you protect them, that's a waste of money. But boxwood, lilac, butterfly bush, these are things that deer don't like. So I'm not going to go into what all these things are. You can look them up, but just understand the principle behind that. And here's some rarely damaged trees. And some of these will vary depending upon the area you are, but some of these may not be all that desirable. It just depends. So check some of these out. And if this was folks here, I would ask you, like, how many people here have used repellents? And we were very interested in this back many years ago and did some research in Montgomery County on commercial deer repellents. And we have a fact sheet on that, and I think the basic principles in it still hold. But look at repellents as an IPM approach, okay? Integrated pest management. In other words, you're evaluating the effectiveness of the repellents by their active ingredient. There's not that many active ingredients in repellents. They're mixed around, but some, don't get so concerned with the trade name, except mix them up, So the thing we know about repellents is they will fail. And if you really want to stop damage, you got an economic interest or in what you're producing, put up a fence. 8 foot is minimum, 9 to 10 foot is better. Most of them work by odor or taste. And you want to apply them typically, the repellents, as deer are changing their pattern. So in the fall, late summer deer, the bucks start moving around, so that when they come into the area, they taste this nasty stuff, and they'll hopefully go to your neighbors. But there are notoriously inconsistent results, and it depends on the availability of other foods. If I was a commercial producer, I wouldn't be relying on repellents. I don't know commercial producers that rely on pellets. If they really need that protection, they're going to put up a fence, okay? Because deer are a long-term problem. Repellents are short-term. You get a really bad weather or really bad drought, the deer are going to be eating stuff anyway. And there's all the money. They're not particularly cheap. It's basically a residential market. It's not a commercial market. But these are the chemicals, or the chemicals. They're just natural ingredients mostly. But putrescent egg-based, that's what most of the original ones were. Some are a fungicide, Thyrum. There's a whole mix of them that are edible animal proteins, basically meat renderings, and the stuff stinks to high heaven, fish and stuff like that. Some of them are based on taste, like Bitrix, very, 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 very bitter stuff. You got to wear gloves to use it. And then some combinations. Don't waste your time with stuff like pepper and garlic. I've never seen that stuff really work too well, but there's a lot of things out there, but these are the main ones that are out there. So, make sure and this is in the managing deer damage guide that's on our website. All the stuff I'm talking about is basically in that publication on managing deer damage. So just understand, you want to mix it up. You want to use different repellents, if you're going to be using them. Keep them guessing. And if you are going to buy them, don't buy the ready to use, buy concentrates online. They're incredibly cheaper. This is just a couple of examples. These are old examples, but it's still, the principle holds. It'd be much cheaper. We did this study in Montgomery County, with yew bushes and azaleas. We staked them in the ground and put applications on in January, and then we took pictures of them to see how much vegetation was being browsed off each of the samples, and randomly assigned repellent treatments. And we used what was cutting edge there, digital photography against a white background to show how, as a deer ate the vegetation, the pixels decrease. And what we got is overall is that the untreated controls, had a whole lot more herbivory than the treated ones. And so we found basically, and again, you can read about this in the fact sheet that's there, but they worked, okay? How well they worked and how acceptable that was going to be, but deer have this uncanny ability. This shows the applications on this one site. This is when they were applied in January. These were the different repellents, okay? These were the controls. So the deer have this uncanny ability. They can just pick it out and know the ones that are untreated. And then they just hammered them. You know, you can see the plant percent remaining, just hammered them. So, you know, I'll just leave it up to you. It may be useful in some of your applications where deer are not that big of a problem. But you know, wintertime is going to be your biggest problem. No question about it. Because summertime, they have other foods. Maybe you can scare them off to eat. And this was just, I'm going to go with that. But basically what we found is that the deer browsing, you know, was January to April. We could get up to 12 weeks. It's maybe 7 weeks, depending upon bad weather and stuff like that. What we did find is that these repellents worked pretty good in Montgomery County, Carroll County, along the Piedmont area and the coastal plain. But once you got up into the mountains of Allegheny, Garrett County, and Western Washington County, the winters are too bad, and basically they were pretty much ineffective. So found a similar case up in Cornell, New York State. So this was this 4-poster treatment stand up in that you see these in Howard County. I'm not sure if they're using them in PG County or not, but you can see before treatment, these are all ticks. And then the pyrethmins, they stick their head necks through there, and the pyrethmins, you know, basically gets on the fur and works its way back and, you know, kill the ticks. So, but just very, very expensive to do. So that's the issue with that. Kind of a problem. And in fact, this was an example. You know, the bait station costs $800. You're feeding them 100 pounds of corn. You know how much, you know, so many pounds per deer, so much per day. So the point of this, to feed 40 deer was about $3,650 per year. So these are very expensive things to maintain. They may work in areas where you have high concentrations of day users and children and stuff like that, but you know, not something for most people that they're going to use. The other thing I'll mention is repellents is, you know, a lot of scare tactics. There's a lot of things out there. This one's up the top is called the dog in a box. And basically, most of these things are based with motion detectors, and either they make noise like the one on the upper top or the one on the lower left that sprays a hose. The one on the right, you know, puts out a real high-pitched sound that people can't hear, but deer hear. Most of these things deer habituate to. They're not cheap. They can cost hundreds of dollars, and I've just never seen them really be effective over the long term. So I would tend to stay away from them. And I've also stayed away from these. Deer whistles, just there's no research to show they work. And it basically gives people a sense of confidence they should not be having. If you're driving at night in a high deer area, you should be driving slow, keeping your eyes on the side of the road, not, you know, going like a bat out of hell because, you know, you got your deer whistles on the bumper. So that's a recipe for disaster. So just so you know about that. We've also done work with you know, dogs within invisible fences, and a lot of people here probably have an invisible fence in their yard and say, oh, well, my dog's going to keep the deer away. Well, the problem with that is that most people's dogs, well, when are deer big? The biggest problem is at night. Okay. And where is Fido at night? Well, he isn't outside chasing deer. He's outside. He's inside by the couch. So, you know, we've worked with systems of pairs of dogs on like 20 to 30 acres with nurseries and pick your own operations. And these are rescue dogs. And, you know, they have automatic feeders and waterers, but they're work dogs. They stay out there 24 hours a day, and they're taken care of. There's a vet protocol and all this stuff. There's a number of nurseries and orchards, you know, that use these, and they can be quite effective. You have a pair of dogs. They have to be visited by humans, some, you know, regular contact and vet care. They can be quite effective, but, you know, you have to like dogs, because what happens if you get this dog, these rescue dogs, right? And they don't work out. One doesn't work out, and that happens. What do you do with the dog? You take it back to the pound? Probably not. So for people that like animals, these can be quite effective. This is Blairland Farms. You may have heard of this. They have dogs. There were some other farms as well, nurseries that have used them. So typically in high value operations, they can be. We had some research that we did at our farm a number of years ago, and there's a fact sheet on my publications page about that as well. So in fact, this was from that study. It was many years ago at this point, but you know we couldn't grow fruit trees because of the deer. And now we could have fenced them, but this we were trying to see if the system worked, and it did work. And these dogs were ruthless. I mean, they killed a lot of groundhogs, raccoons, countless voles, as well as kept the deer away. So, you know, it does work. But what we found, just to boil this down, basically, while it's an initial investment, is relatively cheap because you only have to, you know, wire and a collar, and right now it's GPS stuff typically. It doesn't even have wire. You know, you still have all the costs of maintaining the dogs, feeding them, vet bills, and all that. So if you look at the cost of that, between that and putting up a fence, you know, they're going to be somewhat similar after 20 years. So just something to think about. So let's talk about fencing. This is the gold standard for fencing now, is a 9 to 10 foot solid lock fixed knot fence, non-electric. We went through a number of years with electric fences, and deer just learned how to compromise them. They would pull themselves up and go through, and so most serious growers, commercial growers, are going with fixed knot fences. You don't have a problem with electric. They're very sturdy. You know, things can fall on them and still not crush them. So you know, this is what's out there, and but they're not cheap. Okay, you know, maybe, you know, $6 or $7 a linear foot, but then you got to add in the cost of corners and gates, and a deer guard like this, you know, is $1,000. You know, so depending upon your operation, but the important thing to remember with all these types of fencing operations, especially, is it's all based on a cost benefit, and the question you have to ask as a grower is, how much am I losing to deer? And that's the question many people don't ask themselves, because, okay, so if this was for a large producer, $30,000 a year, but the question is, how much are you losing per year? And you'd be surprised, you're losing more than you think. So how much does the fence cost? How long is the payback period? That's the question you need to ask yourself about fencing. And there's a couple different kinds of fencing, and I'll mention another one, but the fixed knot is the gold standard. But plastic fencing, this fencing's been around for a number of years. It's really quite good. It's light, it's easy to install. It blends in with the woods. Anybody can put this up pretty much. And it comes in all different types and gauges. And the company that does a lot of this work now has done a lot of marketing and product development is deerbusters.com. And that's where I usually send people, because they have a lot of different products, but they have plastic coated metal wire fences, a lot of options, okay, not just plastic fencing like you see on the left there. So this shows you, it basically can be put up, you put the posts up, you put wires up in the bottom, up on the top, I mean, a wire in the middle and a wire in the bottom, and basically you use plastic ties to hang the fence from the wires. And deer will get through it. And it can be fixed relatively easy, but there is a lot of maintenance involved with these fences. So you get snow and ice sometimes, but you know, for small operations, this is quite effective and quite cost effective. You know, most of this fencing's maybe $1 or so, $1.50 a linear foot. That doesn't include the posts, which are the most expensive part of that. But this has been used in a lot of different applications, and especially for small operations. And again, the good thing is if you put it up against a wooded backdrop, the black, you don't even barely see it. In fact, you have to put, as you can see here, my pointer, you can see the flagging. You put flagging up just so the deer can see it. You know, make sure that they see it. They don't run into the fence. In fact, that's my daughter now, who just turned over 30 years old. So it's an old picture. So this fencing's been around for a while, and most of it comes from Italy. But there's a number of different products that have come out that have spurred on from it. And again, you can get all kinds of gates and corners, and that's going to drive the price up. There's no question about it. but you can keep deer out of these, and you can get 9 to 10 foot on these fences. And it can be quite effective. So I encourage you, for those that really have serious deer problems, this would probably be the most cost-effective option for most of you in many cases to look at. If you don't want to get into the cost of $6, $7, $8 a linear foot for something more permanent. The other option is these small polywire fences that are basically hooked up to an electric charger. And these are basically high voltage, low impedance electric chargers, short pulse, short duration, number of pulses per minute. They can run on battery, AC. I always suggest people hook up to an AC if they can, even if it means running a wire underground for, a ways to get to it, because it's just more reliable and they're cheaper, and you get a lot more power. And power is measured in joules of energy for the dollar. So again, you can read about this, but a lot of this is using poly tape or poly wire. And this is plastic with filament through it. For those of you who have horses or sheep, it's a similar material used for those grazing animals, and it just connects the current. And basically, we've done this with these fences, these polywire fences, which are not physical barriers; they're psychological barriers. So there's one about this, about 36 inches, and one below there, about halfway. And usually the fences are baited with flagging. Like metal flagging, flashing, with peanut butter in between it. And the idea here is, and there is some commercial projects like you see on the right, but basically you're attracting the deer to the fence. So it's like a little kid with a stove. They're going to get there, they're going to touch it with their noses, which is the only part of the deer that's not really insulated, and they get nabbed with a quick duration of some high voltage, and they stay away. And these fences can be quite effective in many areas. And I used it here on this old apple orchard, applying these apple trees. It's been used in gardens all over the place. You see on the right there, in this case on the lower right is, actually they were concerned about deer coming in, bucks coming into the big windows they had. Christmas tree plantations, orchards, some small farm crops. You say, how can that keep a deer out? Well, again, you're psychologically training them. You put it up, you electrify it right away. They may knock it down, but you'd be checking it regularly. And the big problem with these fences is, well, there's different arrangements. You can see a double poly wire here in this case to kind of give them this depth perception. There's all kinds of Rube Goldberg ways to mess with it. But the biggest Achilles heel of this is snow. So the reason the animal gets shocked is because, its hooves in the ground, touches with the body, makes electrical current. And, when you have snow, snow's an insulator. So these fences are quite effective for a lot of summer operations. And I really encourage you to try it. If for home gardens, it's the best thing since sliced bread. I mean, really, you'd be surprised how it can make deer. So if you have a lot of these small summer plantings and, you say, well, you worry about pets and children, but this isn't like the chargers of yesteryear that you touch it and hold it like it electrocutes you. These are, you touch it, it immediately throws you off of it. So even animals, and frankly, even if a human were to touch it, they just wouldn't touch it again. It's not going to cause physical harm. So something for you to think about: polywire, poly tape fences. And this is just a comparison, rough comparisons between the cost per labor and the cost per foot. And it's really a linear foot. Then of course you have to add in the cost of gates and all that kind of stuff. So let's see where we are in time. I want to finish up here. Metal fencing for groundhogs, you can get hardware cloth like this, bury that in the ground, bring it out about a foot or so. That can help dissuade groundhogs. And in fact, you can use polywire fences as well. You put wires really close to the ground, and I've done that too, to keep groundhogs and rabbits out. You have to keep it taut. You have to keep the vegetation away, and control the vegetation so it doesn't short out. But that can work. I'll just mention hunting, that that is the most economical, practical method of deer population regulation, and so that's not a non-lethal control. But again, I encourage you to look at this as an option and encourage this with your with your local government officials with managed hunts. But you can also use crop damage permits. And I'll just say that, there's all kinds of hunting seasons for archery and muzzleloader and things like that. And Montgomery County, Howard County, I know they have managed hunts on government properties, and they're quite effective. And they've been very effective at reducing deer populations in many areas of those counties. So if you have a county which doesn't have this type of program, I encourage you to contact them and ask about it. Sharpshooters are very expensive. That's really more in high urban areas. But the thing that most of you are qualified for, if you're a farm, if you can qualify as an agricultural operation, or if you have a written forest stewardship plan, you can get crop damage permits where, deer, mostly female deer, can be harvested year round. You just need to contact the Maryland DNR Wildlife Division, and they'll issue permits to commercial growers. The question is, will they see you as a commercial grower, as a small urban farmer, if that's even something you're interested in, or can you actually, hunt in the area you're in? Those are all issues. But just to say that Maryland is very proactive in working with growers to manage and reduce the deer population down to lower levels. So, and just to give you an idea, I picked these numbers out of the last deer report from PG County. There was a total of harvested of 2,196 deer in 1919 to the winter of 2020, out of almost 80,000 for Maryland. But if you look at crop damage permits, there was only about 212 deer compared to statewide over 10,000. So just interesting numbers. And you can see where PG County is a shotgun county only in terms of firearms, but of course archery is allowed and things like that. So just a tidbit of information for you. What I would tell you is if you live in urban areas, by law, you have to be 150 yards typically from the nearest dwelling to hunt, okay? But in some of the counties, they've reduced that length, but if you have written permission from your neighbors, you can basically hunt off your back porch. I mean, so that's how that works. And this does allow hunting in subdivisions, but of course, one person within that 150-yard area is going to, be a problem, right? So just, if you do have the option for hunting, I'd encourage that. I'm going to just finish up by talking just quickly about vole management options. And those 4 management options are cultural, trapping. And gosh, I really apologize that I've gone about my time here, but just to quick things about voles. This is kind of a summary. The easiest way to deal with voles is to remove the habitat, mowing the grass, using herbicide strips, minimize mulching. Instead of volcano mulching and 3 to 5 inches of mulch, that's what's going to get you in trouble. Encourage predators, provide perches for hawks and owls, and don't kill snakes, especially black snakes. They just eat a lot of rodents. And if you do have a problem, the best way in most cases is going to be in landscapes in small areas that most of you are probably used to working in, is to use to use mouse traps. Put them on like a 10 by 10 or 5 by 5 grid pattern. Hide them like I told you before, cover them, put them perpendicular to some trails, put peanut butter on them, and basically just keep, as they keep getting caught, dispose of them. So commercial applications, I'm not going to get really into that, but you have to be a commercial applicator typically to use rodenticides, and requires a pesticide certification. So that's a totally different animal. And I'm just going to give you a few pictures here about, this is a problem. A lot of people take all these wood chips and they'll pile them up around. Boy, voles getting there, watch out. Total coverage landscapes. In this case, this is an apple orchard where they have herbicide strips and mow the grass. Good thing. Cats are good. Snakes are good. Owls and hawks. But these don't deal with an acute problem. If you have an acute problem, you're going to have to either look at the use of rodenticides or, trapping is typically the most common way. And again, just to reiterate, the most effective time that you want to trap is starting in probably September, when all the green vegetation is dying out and they're looking for food, they're getting hungry. That's when they're going to take bait. That's when they're going to go into traps and typically be more likely to, not that you can't do it other times, but that's going to, when you're going to get, and you want, most importantly, you want to get them out of the area before fall and winter, because then they're going to just hammer all your other stuff. So this is kind of an example of, you know, some traps and along a path here, covering it up. You could use a shingle, coffee cans, whatever. Sticky pet straps. I know some people would say those are inhumane, but there's a lot of options. And this trapping with skunks and woodchucks and squirrels. I remember it's really illegal to take these animals and take them elsewhere on someone else's property. I just don't encourage. I don't think it's really humane, because, you know, there's a lot of stress these animals, and the right thing to do really is to euthanize these animals. There's of course a number of different ways to do that. So anyway, I'm not going to go into thing, but the last final thing is to know the law and complying with, you know, state and federal regulations with regards to pesticides and all these other things. And fencing, you know, some counties have ordinances against 8 to 10 foot fences. In many counties like Montgomery County, I think they've actually got the county to change their ordinances because the deer are such a problem. And that's another thing you can do as well. So anyway, this is our website. We just redid everything, University of Maryland websites, extension.umd.edu/woodland. And I put some of those resources in the chat. So and this is our new address, actually, go.umd.edu/woodland, taking you to the same place. And you'll find a lot of information there. We have YouTube recordings and publications and all that kind of stuff. So with that, I will thank you very much. And I'm going to stop sharing here, okay?
Thank you so much, Jonathan. That was great. Some great suggestions and things to consider. And I know I always get confused with moles and voles, so that was helpful for me. I didn't know, Luke, did you have anything to add or that you wanted to share? I know you threw a couple of things in the chat box. I didn't know if you wanted to talk about them a little bit, and then we can open it up for questions for the two of you.
No, I am happy. I've just been sort of tag teaming a little bit along in the chat box, and happy to answer any questions people have. I'm happy to go straight to Q&A.
Sounds great. So if folks have questions, you can indicate by coming off of mute or sharing your video, or even if you look under the reactions button, there is a raise hand feature. So if you guys want to do that, Luke and Jonathan are here to answer your questions.
Hi, Tim, this is Jamila. Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Okay, so first I want to say I love these open mics. I do. But I'm going to just say I think this is one of our best open mics. I have learned so much. And actually, like, one of my questions was already addressed. And I was kind of nervous about asking this because I didn't want to seem like a wuss. But we do have these black snakes on our farm. Sometimes we run over them. Sometimes, you know, we may accidentally till over them, or, you know, and they're just startling, you know, when you're working and then a snake just kind of jumps up at you. So I was going to ask, like, what am I supposed to do when one of these things pays me a visit? And from what I've learned, Jonathan, is I should just do nothing.
Well, that's not necessarily true. I mean, I think what you can do is you can move them. You actually can. I mean, a lot of times they'll get in people's basements and garages, and you can actually, because they really don't bite per se. I mean, you want to move them carefully, but there's ways to move snakes in bags or whatever. But you can relocate them so they're not a problem. But they eat a lot of rodents. I mean, not just voles, but mice too. And there's something to be said. If you got a snake in your basement, your garage, you probably got mice. So, right.
A good indicator species, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you for that, Jamila.
But do be cautious of those copperheads, northern copperheads. They usually don't kill you, but they can hurt. They can hurt you pretty bad and cause quite a bit of nerve damage and just a lengthy recovery period. So they'll be hiding out in places with structure and bushes and things. So be careful just before you stick your hand down into anything to look out for anything there.
Yeah, I mean, copperheads are a different point. And a little personal story. My wife, just before I met her, she got bit by a copperhead down by the New River in Virginia and had to go to the hospital, and her leg swelled up terribly, but she's okay. But I mean, you know, to be honest with you, copperheads are one of those cases where if they're in an area where you have people and children, you know, most people are gonna kill them and or remove, you know, take care of them, because there is that danger. There is a danger there for sure. Wouldn't you say so, Luke? I mean, you know, that's common sense, kind of.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Legally, there are legal aspects to it, so I don't know. I'm not totally up to. You might legally not be allowed to kill them, I think, according to some of the regulations, but I've not read them all fully. But yes, I think it's actually pretty common that people will dispatch them.
I guess I better know the law better next time I speak.
I will say that at least black king snakes will eat copperheads. So that's another reason to encourage the black ones.
I have a question.
Felice and Linda, I see your hands.
Yes.
My only question was making a distinction between the snakes, as I'm not really a fan of them at all. So, I mean, snake is a snake is a snake to me. How can I get more information about what, because I've already found 2 this season so far, and they were gray. I don't know if that means anything. They were baby snakes. I don't.
Oh, they might have been worm snakes, which are these really cute little small snakes. And I understand people's fear of snakes. Sorry, Jonathan. Do you mind if I take this one?
No, why don't you? Because I think you've done more stuff with this than me. But
so I'm going to put a link. Maryland DNR has a great page on snakes, and I'm going to share this with you right now. And there's only one venomous snake in Maryland, and that's the copperhead. And so if it was gray, it probably wasn't a venomous one. Several others will bite. There's a northern water snake that looks a little bit like a copperhead because they have a lot of variation in their colors, and they tend to have stripes going around their body. But those will bite you and cause profuse bleeding, but they don't have any venom. So really the only one to truly watch out for, to be most careful of, is the copperhead. Beyond that, again, they eat mice, they eat frogs, insects, and other things around your house. But yes, there have been studies on humans' just innate fear of snakes. So it's totally normal. They've done various things with interesting studies, and they found, it's just hardwired into us to be very surprised or not like them. So probably something going back to tens of thousands of years ago, and a lot of time in our past that's gotten hardwired into us. But in Maryland, there's just only the main ones we watch out for is that copperhead, and it's described on that link I just shared with you.
Also, I was curious about squirrels.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, squirrels are another one where a lot of people will take squirrels and they'll trap them and then they let them go somewhere else. And you know, there's no easy answers to that, because what happens is, you know, we have the same problem in my house, right? We never used to have any squirrels. Now we got them. They're raiding the bird feeder. So you have to get a bird feeder designed where they can't get to it. But you know, Luke, you're more familiar with some of the actual regulations on squirrels. I mean,
I put a link to all the regulations online. I mean, I think there are the regulations, and then there's the sort of common practice that's done. And I know a lot of people just don't follow it's just, they're very detailed. I think there are 16 pages of regulations. And, where do I start with squirrels? let me just look at the regulations right here. You can, they're fur bearers. They're classified as fur bearers. So you could take them within the hunting season with legal hunting methods. And then as far as trapping, don't see a lot of description about trapping regulations for them. But yeah, generally those cage traps, if you can get them to go in there and trap them in box traps, relocate them to a different area, probably the experience will probably deter them. What are they eating? What kind of damage are they causing?
Well, I had some garden beds prepped and they've been like digging around in them. So I'm just nervous before I put anything in there, what they're going to do.
Yeah. That's, honestly, there's certain types of wildlife where at some point, you may have to trap them and remove them. And I guess that could be euthanizing them. That could be, it's just a lot of things people don't want to talk about, but especially in some cases, squirrels will get up, they start getting up into the attic. You get enough of them, they start gnawing through your siding, and they can be very, very problematic. And at that point, it's, a lot of times some people will actually call animal, there's animal control people. That's what they do. They come and they take care of problem wildlife and they will charge you a good penny for it. And typically they will euthanize those animals as far as I know. So that's usually the options.
Linda, did you have a question?
Oh, I almost forgot what it was. It was like I was thinking about the snake deterrent. What is a good granular snake deterrent? I've heard of using sulfur, which I used for years, and I never saw a snake, but I've seen several here, and some were lucky and some weren't. But I heard you don't use the mothballs. But what besides sulfur and the granular stuff that smells like mothballs, the naphthalene type stuff, can you use that's environmentally safe?
Well, I think a basic principle for us as extension folks is that, we can't recommend things, you don't find on the label for mothballs that it's used as a snake deterrent.
Yeah.
So, you're not going to find us recommending mothballs and sulfur. And honestly, I mean, I think that's where we're limited. People have all kinds of home remedies, but that's really not, we just get ourselves into trouble.
Right.
Doing stuff like that. I don't know if you have any other comments, Luke, on that, but we got.
Yeah, I understand. I
know the line.
No, I'm looking up some of this. I'm looking up what you're describing, and I'm seeing some other people seem to try other things. Sulfur does seem to. It sounds like it's worked for you. So if it works for you, I would say, continue to try it. But then I'm seeing some other things like clove or cinnamon oil. And other things like that. I guess it also depends on how big an area you want to keep them out of,
right?
And to be effective, and
and
but
stuff that's not
sulfur is working well for you.
Yeah,
I want to keep with that.
And stuff that's not toxic is different.
Right.
But mothballs, of course, are toxic.
Yeah,
and to be honest with you, if you called us or called me or called Luke, I get these types of questions. I'd probably be doing exactly what Luke is doing. I'd be looking it up on the computer through a number of what I can consider credible and reliable sources, and
absolutely,
and trying to give a response to someone like yourself who, if it wasn't something I was all that familiar with. So.
Yeah, I've just heard of people using them, but they're just nauseous.
Oh, okay.
I can't stand the smell of them myself, so I don't use them. I was just wondering. People have said that they use them. I was like, this stuff is, you can smell it a mile away, but
I'm curious here, is anybody using fencing around their operations right now, or?
I am. I have fences, and it doesn't deter the groundhog. He's still trying to get in this one particular area, but I keep blocking him. So I know where he's coming from, and I'm trying to block him, but the next one might have to pull out the trap. So, but the county doesn't pick up groundhogs anymore. They used to. I know about up until maybe 6 or 7 years ago, they would come and pick them up, but they don't, not in Prince George's County anymore.
Okay.
So you're on your own, just got to follow the rules, I guess.
Anybody else use fencing or thought about it in our operation? Or
Yeah, I haven't.
Renee, I use fencing here.
what kind of fencing?
It's the wood fence in the community, but everybody doesn't have fencing. And I gotta tell you, it keeps all the critters out. A rabbit might get in when I open the gate, but other than that, oh no. I chased the rabbit around with some water for a good half an hour. And then he left with the baby.
Okay.
No, I've used wood fencing and the metal fencing, and they both work for like the larger animals. It's usually like just the snakes and the squirrels that we've seen now so far.
So how tall are these fences, though? That's my question.
I say about 7-8 feet.
Okay. Okay.
All right. This is Anthony. We use the plastic deer fencing, and it's about 8 feet.
Yeah. Yeah, 8 feet's the minimum for deer, but probably works in some of the, especially in these more urban areas. Yeah.
Do deer?
I think I'd add on. It might. Sorry, go ahead, Linda.
Oh, the perception, their sight perception. Does the type of fencing have anything to do with it? Some people say if you put, I know you talked about those little flags on there where it kind of messes up their vision. But say if somebody has a wrought iron fence, and the deer used to like just massacre the place till she put up a wrought iron fence, but they don't try to jump the fence. Is it because of their sight as being like, I guess, I don't know, is it messing with their sight that they can't see where they're trying to jump anymore with the lines? Is that a reason why? Because they haven't tried to get in that place and she put that wrought iron fence up. And it's not a 8-foot fence, it's a smaller, like a 6-foot fence, a 6-foot fence.
Jonathan, you want to take this, or should I try it?
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, yeah.
One thing I would say is that some of this also depends on the sort of layout of the landscape.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have, and what's around, if you're fencing something right by a house,
mm-hmm.
and it's a small area and there's lots of food outside of that area, they might not want to jump into a small area like that.
Mm-hmm.
That also might be part of it. It might seem enclosed to them, so they might not want to get into a place that's too small.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be another factor. And maybe they got plenty of food outside of it.
Okay.
What I'm imagining, but there could be other things too.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Okay.
And I'll add, like, some people have put up some very rinky-dink fences, and again, it sort of depends on the layout, and put plastic bags on them, just things like that. If it's a smaller area and they have elsewhere to go, something like that might be enough of a deterrent just to keep them out.
Nadisha and Jamila, did you guys have questions? Maybe we start with Nadisha, since I know, Jamila, you asked one question. We'll come back around to you. Okay, go ahead, Jamila. I thought maybe Nadisha had a question.
Oh, thanks, Kim. Yeah, so I wanted to talk, well, first, we don't have a fence around our property yet. We did get a grant to put one up, but our farm is like 15 acres that's shared amongst 3 of us farmers, and it's going to take a while before that project is complete. So my question is regarding the repellents. I saw the slide with the chart. I feel like you don't want to say which one to buy, but it appears that the liquid fence and maybe one more repellent, I can't remember from the slide. Can you just talk a little bit more about those sprays and how I can make it work for me while I'm waiting on our permanent fence to be installed?
Yeah. Yeah, so liquid fence actually is, I always thought was a very good one, and the price was very good. compared to big game repellent and some of the others, it's extremely affordable. And I've talked with other people that have used it as well and gotten pretty good results. It's basically a putrescent egg-based product. So, my suggestion always is to mix it up. Use that for a year and then perhaps try another one if you're going to have another next year. Maybe you want to try one of the animal-based ones. But new ones come out all the time. But basically, if you look at the active ingredients, they're kind of a combination of the eggs or the meat or fish, byproducts, and then some of them are the thyrum, the fungicide, which I really don't think is a great thing to use because I'm not sure why you want to be spraying fungicide all over your shrubs and stuff because fungi is important in the soil and everything. But it is a side effect of the fungicide, and but you get into a lot of stuff with garlic and some of that stuff. Pepper. Haven't seen a lot of the Bitrix is the other one, the bitter one. That's extremely effective too. But if you use it, make sure you wear gloves because man, you get that stuff in your fingers, you'll lick your finger a week later and you'll like curdle your tongue, So. But look at the publication.
John, what about edibles? Do you want to say anything about how, like, if these are edible foods and?
No. This is all for ornamentals. The only thing that was really out there, I'm not sure if there's anything more, but most of the things that are out there for edibles are like a Hinder was one, and it's basically an ammonia type product. But as soon as it rains, it washes off. I mean, you can't have something that's gonna, seep into your lettuce, right? So really repellents are really for ornamentals. They're not for, I would not use them on edibles. I would build a fence around my garden or try the polywire fences.
Another thing that I put in the chat earlier when Jonathan was talking about this, but one of our farm managers down at the Lower Eastern Shore Research Education Center had had great success with Irish Spring soap and a cheese grater, and he just grates. It has to be the green kind. The blue kind doesn't work, and he just walks and shreds and he reapplies it every couple of weeks, and he's had good success, especially if there's stuff on the other side of it that they can go to. But he said this worked well, and it's not actually on your foods.
Actually, that's a good point because soap. Cornell did a lot of work with soap in apple orchards, and they found really they probably needed soap about every 3 to 4 feet apart, bars of soap, hanging bars of soap. I haven't heard of the shaving, but that's another option. Some people claim using hair, putting human hair. The other thing that's out there also, there's some things like coyote urines, so they're basically like an area thing. You put that around your garden area, and of course it alarms them because of the coyote urine smell. But if you're in an area that are really urban deer that don't really see any predators, that may be less effective. But I forgot about those. I should have mentioned those. Those are, and soap, like you said. But again, most of the things I've seen with soap, I've been using it on ornamentals as well, on apple orchards and stuff, fruit trees.
May I ask a follow-up to that?
Yeah.
Okay. So I use a lot of bone meal just to fertilize my my crops, and I was wondering because here's the deal. I am surprised every time I get to the farm and my crops are still there. Pressure on our farm, and so I was wondering, like, well, maybe this bone meal is deterring them. Could that be working or no? I'm just lucky.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe you know some. I haven't heard that, but yeah, maybe you're just lucky. Yeah, buy a lottery ticket.
I will add it. Sometimes it takes deer a year or two to figure out what tastes good. I know for hunters that try to plant food crops for deer to attract them to certain areas, it'll take a year or two for the deer to figure out, oh, this is yummy. So it might be something they're not used to, and they just don't realize that it's really palatable and nutritious. And so maybe once they get that first bite.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to take one more question from Nadisha, and then we're going to wrap up this portion of the program so that we can hear from Sarah. Sure.
Let me quickly say on the snake thing, in southern Maryland, the only venomous snake is the copperhead. Up in the mountains in western
Rattlesnakes.
Maryland, you do have rattlesnakes, timber rattlesnakes. I want to make sure, I realized that later. I was like, I got to say that just so people know. But they're not down here in Prince George's County.
I had a question about the groundhogs. So just to be clear, the only real method you know of removing groundhogs is trapping. I've had some groundhogs dig out under my shed. I have a container. I've been trying to use, heavy rocks to basically line the whole area. It's a back and forth fight. They've not decided to move. They've still tried to dig out. So, I was looking for options to kind of get them out of that area. So you're saying the only real method of removing them from the property is trapping?
No, that's not necessarily true. So there are a number of products you can buy. They're like flare type things or noxious gas type things that you basically ignite and you put in the hole and you plug up the other entrances. And basically it's either noxious gas or some of them just remove the oxygen, but it's incumbent upon finding all the the exits. So, I mean, those are things that can be done in a real urban context. You just got to be careful, with some of that, but that's a definite possibility. And I don't know if you have anything else, Luke, but those products are out there for sure.
No, nothing else to add. If you can, lethal can, outside of trapping, if you can shoot them, I think somebody mentioned in the chat using a 17 HMR, which somebody asked, what's that? That's a small caliber rifle for small animals like that. Crossbows are pretty accurate and can be used in closer and smaller environment, closer to in more urban areas.
I will just.
But legally, I think in Prince George's County, it still has 150 yards distance requirement.
And I'm not sure you can use firearms or not. I will tell you, I live in Washington County. Just a little story to end on. And we had a huge groundhog that was under my shed, robbing our garden. And I finally did catch it. And they're not easy to catch in the open. And used a firearm on it. And it proceeded to go and die under my shed and stank for 2-3 years. So even in death, the groundhog may get the final say. They're very resilient. So don't take that story the wrong way. It's just that they're not easy to deal with. There's no easy answers many times. Well, thanks a lot for the opportunity to talk to you all and have our contact information if you have anything else.
Yes, thank you guys so much. This was truly helpful. Give folks lots of ideas and things to think about. If you guys don't mind, you may have already done it, but if you could do it again, just because I think some folks joined later, dropping your emails in the chat box. So if folks have additional follow-up questions, they can reach out to you. And so, yeah, we'll be sending out a recording later this week, as well as the links that Luke has put into the chat box. I'll send those out as well. And last but not least, if you decide to try firearms, please don't say that Soil Conservation District encouraged you.
Yeah, I don't know the laws. Every county is different.
Depends on where you are.
Follow the regulations in your ordinance, in your proximity.
Steve Darcy won't be happy with me if we're on the news for encouraging that. Anyway, that's a bit of a joke though. But anyway, thank you guys so much. Really appreciate your help. Please folks get on there. If you guys have a link to subscribe to your newsletters, feel free to drop them in the chat box as well so folks can subscribe.
Yeah, we have a quarterly forestry newsletter that we put out called Branching Out. It's on our website. You can subscribe there, but if you'd like to receive it, you can always unsubscribe anytime. We don't sell your contact information, but anyway, you'll find what you need there. But thank you very much. And going to sign off now, if that's okay.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Okay.
Take care. Everybody.
Good luck. Right. Good luck. Oh, just one final comment is that I did put a comment in there that for many years, I worked with natural resource income opportunities, mushrooms and ginseng and, greenhouses and all these other kinds of things. And on our website, there is I have a whole section under publications under income opportunities with a bunch of information on different things that you may find useful and interesting. Okay, thank you.
Thank you all.
Take care.
All right. Next up, we have our Ag Law Education Initiative team, Sarah and Megan. They have a concept to introduce to you guys and some questions for you. So I'm going to let Sarah and Megan take it away.
Thanks, Kim. Yeah, so I know it's late. We'll keep this very quick. We just wanted to walk through a few slides. Thanks for letting us join your chat tonight. In case you all don't know us or don't know the Ag Law Education Initiative, started around 2011, the Maryland General Assembly gave a directive to the University of Maryland that said, please help preserve family farms. And the way we do that is through legal education. So we're a group of attorneys. We provide education in a variety of different ways. We create legal publications. We do in-person presentations. We do online outreach. We've done a lot of online outreach in the last year. And we really enjoy getting to know farmers, and I wish we could be in person with you all tonight. But just to be a little bit more specific, there's attorneys that work at 3 branches of the University of Maryland. University of Maryland, Baltimore, that's where my colleague Megan and I work. You'll hear from Megan in a minute. University of Maryland College Park and University of Maryland Eastern Shore. So if you've never checked out our resources, I encourage you to do so. I'm sure there'll probably be something that we've created that will be of interest to you, I hope. At this point, we've got about 53 publications and 59 videos. And so Megan will pop our website in the chat. It's umaglaw.org, so it's a pretty easy one. Things that I think would be specifically of interest to all of you. We've got some really great resources on formulating community-supported agriculture agreements, a fairly new one on this, farmers market vendor agreements, a lot on labor law, a lot on food safety. So if you go to the About tab on our website, you'll hit a food safety page. We've got a whole page on food safety, a lot on the produce safety rule, and not just what the produce safety rule is, but how to actually put that into practice on your operations. We also collaborate with our friends in Extension. So these are 2 publications that we've collaborated on in the last couple of years that I thought would be of interest to all of you. And again, Megan's going to help me by putting these links in the chat. The one is specifically on urban agriculture. It's a pretty extensive publication, and there's a whole chapter on a lot of different legal considerations for you. And then the Maryland Beginning Farmer Guidebook. Even if you're not a beginning farmer, if you've been farming for a while now, I still think it'd probably be worth you checking out this publication. We just finished this in the last year or so, right before COVID. So it's really up to date, and it touches on a lot of different topics. And so I think that'd be a great one. One thing just to plug, since we've got all of you here, is that we do an annual Agricultural and Environmental Law Conference. So this year it's going to be on November 18th. We will have an in-person option for registration and a live stream option. It's in Annapolis, so for you PG County folks not too far away. Some of the topics that we'll be covering this year, some things I thought might be of interest to you all, the role of food policy councils and the new local food enterprise program that was finally passed through the General Assembly, requiring institutions to buy local food, carbon trading, and the Chesapeake Bay cleanup. Those are just a few of the things that we'll be touching on. We typically have a panel or 2 at this conference that allows people to get nutrient management continuing ed credits or pesticide credits. Stay tuned for that. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Megan to talk about this upcoming webinar series.
Oh, thank you for unmuting me. Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, so we were hoping, I know it's late, so we'll try to make it quick, but we were hoping that you could serve as a little focus group for us for a summer project or a summer webinar series that we're planning and working on right now to organize. And basically, we're going to do a program probably late July through August about harnessing your farm story to build a successful farm brand. So Kim just stuck a link in the chat box to Padlet, where there's some boxes here with all these questions. And we would really appreciate it if you could give us your input, your honest thoughts about these topics. If you'd be interested in attending any webinar that covers information about, building up strategies for building your farm brand. And then on the legal aspect, because what we do is legal education, is if you would be interested in learning more about the legal do's and don'ts connected to online marketing and advertising your products. And that could be through social media or email, listservs, things like, or your website. And then another topic would be legally protecting your brand and use through intellectual property. So if that's a topic that you'd be interested in learning more about, what is it? How can you use it to protect the resources or the creative product that you're working on to promote your business? Please let us know. If none of those areas are attractive to you or, of interest to you, or maybe you're just kind of beyond those basic topics, please let us know if there's other legal information that you need help with. We're definitely all ears. We're happy to hear anything that you have to say. That's one of the reasons that I was really excited to attend tonight, just to hear what you're interested in and what concerns you have. And then on the logistics side, trying to figure out when we schedule these webinars, what time of day really works best for you. I know July and August might not be the best time, end of summer. So let us know if a lunch hour webinar would work better for you, if you'd be more likely to attend then, or if something in the evening, like around this time after dinner, would be preferable to you. Yeah, and if anybody doesn't have access to Padlet, please, you can type in the chat, or you can email me directly or Sarah directly, any way that you feel like you want to provide comments or feedback. Do whatever is easy for you. And, if you feel like you want to give feedback, like I said, on any other resources that you think would be helpful to you and your business, and please share your ideas.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Megan. And if anyone has any questions that they would like to ask Sarah or Megan, feel free to come off mute or go ahead and use the raise hand feature under the reactions tab. Or if you have some other questions for them, not specific to their questions regarding the webinar series, if you just have general questions about some of the other resources they have. They are such a wealth of information. They have a great blog. So I highly recommend you get on their email list. And I don't know if you guys have a link to that here, or if that's just on, I think it's right on your website. I can't remember, but maybe you could talk about that.
Yeah, I meant to mention that. Yeah, we write for the Maryland Risk Management Education blog. So Megan can throw that in the chat if she didn't already previously. That's a great thing to subscribe to. It's not too many emails a week. It's usually about 2 posts a week. We touch on topics that are of interest to Maryland folks. When there's important things happening nationally, we try to explain why they would, be of interest to Maryland folks, and we try to highlight things that Maryland farmers should know about. And we write about legal things in a way that everybody can understand. We don't like legalese. We don't use legalese. We try not to.
And we appreciate that. All right. Maybe actually, let's see. Megan, if you want to stop sharing your screen, maybe, or Sarah, we could go back to gallery view and see if we have any other questions. And Sarah put her email and Megan's email in the chat box. So if you guys have, follow-up questions later, I know it's getting a little bit late, please do that. And we will send out these resources along with the wildlife management resources later this week.
Yeah, be in touch with us anytime. I'll put my phone number in the chat too, because we also have a legal info line, which means you can call me and I will do some research for you and try to find the answers to your questions. We cannot do direct representation. So if your neighbor sues you, I can't go to court with you. I used to do that for 9 years. I don't do that anymore now that I work for the university, but we can try to help you find a lawyer who can go to court with you if that's what you need. But oftentimes folks just call us with research questions, and Megan and I are able to help them, along the way with things.
That's a great resource because, a lot of our urban farmers are innovative and creative. And so they might be, going down a road that, may or may not be legal, or, may need some research on some other parameters. So that's a great offer, Sarah and Megan. All right, I'm not seeing any questions. Sarah and Megan, thank you so much. I know Linda had an announcement, and also I know Elizabeth Hoffman, I hate to put you on the spot before Linda just speaks quickly, but Elizabeth is going to talk about the LEAD program. So I didn't know if she wouldn't mind coming off camera or just coming off for a few seconds just to say hi, but she's going to talk about this awesome program at our next open mic night.
Sure, yeah, sorry, my camera's not set up right now, but yeah, I'd be happy to talk about the LEAD Maryland program. It's the University of Maryland Extension. And yeah, next meeting, I'd be happy to kind of go through, the application process, and it's opening this summer, and kind of give some more details on that. If anyone has questions, let me find the link and I'll put it in the chat real quick, so you can kind of prepare yourself for questions for next time.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And if folks aren't familiar with the LEAD, it's an ag development course that's offered through University of Maryland Extension and some other partners. And it's, from what I've heard, is a fantastic program. It's on my bucket list to do, and Elizabeth is currently in the class. And you get to visit a bunch of cool farms and learn about different operations and legal information and all that stuff. I'm not going to go into it too much because Elizabeth is going to go into a little bit at our next open mic night, which I believe is June 15th. I have to double check the date, but please join us every, third Tuesday. What Tuesday are we? Third Tuesday of the month. Sorry, it's getting a little late for me too. And then I know Linda has an announcement. Thanks again, Elizabeth.
No problem.
You ready for me, Kim?
I am ready.
Okay. Seems like my thing is looking weird now, but it might be just my eyesight. Okay, I mentioned earlier about the effort we're going to try to put forth to try to get a space for urban farmers at a local active farmers market. And the one that I talked about earlier was the Capital Market that's at the corner of Central Avenue. I think there's Campton Park Boulevard, right at the Home Depot, right underneath the Beltway, right there. Good area. And I've been speaking with the people, the market managers. So I have some information, but I don't have all of it. But I am going to, they assured me that I could get a table there. And when I sent the message out via the group, basically asking who wanted to participate if the possibility was there. The basis of it is to get some of our products out on a market collectively until we can find, or as an effort to get people's products out in one unified manner. You can sit at the table any week that you want to. We'll set up a schedule as to who can, who will be there for each week, but I won't be able to be there every weekend, and maybe most of you guys won't be able to be there every weekend either. But if somebody could man the table for at least 2 people every Friday, and we can swap up and bring our products to the table, bring any types of information that you want to give to the customers or potential customers regarding your farm. So I'm going to get more information tomorrow when I speak with the group in a conference call and then I'll come back to the group and give you more details as to what you can expect from the effort. And also, I will go ahead and just pay the fee for whatever the whole season is. So don't worry about that. It'll just be something that we can share together. And again, I'll get all of the details to you after I speak with the group tomorrow. And they had a meeting last week, but by the time I got the message, it was like 20 minutes before the meeting and I wasn't home, so I didn't get on the call, but I did speak with a lady earlier last week after that meeting happened. But I'll get more information back to you after I speak with them. So if anybody's interested, it's going to be Friday, every Friday from June to October. May not be the end of October, maybe mid-October, but it'll be 3 full months. Whatever products or services that you're planning to offer this year, this will be a way to at least get some information out, get some of your products out, and get your information out to the public. So that's all I have
Linda,
for right
I would
now.
like to do it. You can put me
Okay.
down.
Okay.
Because I was
Please,
gonna try to do the market, but it was just gonna be too much for me to do by myself. So this is great.
Yeah, it's a lot. So I think the more people that can do it, it would be really good to just taste the waters of what happens at farmers markets on a weekly basis. So anybody that's interested, send the email to the group until I give you other information. And I'll go in and read all of that, and then we'll all get together. And anybody that wants to come in and out throughout the season, that's perfectly fine. Just let us know who will be there, so we'll make sure that the table will have someone there each week. So look forward to working with you all on this effort. So we'll do big and better things, but we got to start out, I guess, crawling until we can walk. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Linda. And if anyone else is interested, again, Linda, if you can put your email in the chat box, that would be great.
Okay.
You can also reach Linda via the Google group. And then I'm also going to drop our Facebook address. We have a Facebook group, and I know Linda has put some information there as well about it. So those are a couple of different ways that you can be in touch with Linda about this particular project. I know Linda's also interested in potentially starting some sort of farm alliance for Prince George's County urban farmers. So if we want to focus on that for any of the upcoming open mic nights, we're welcome to do that. Just let me know and we can definitely put that on the agenda.
Yeah.
And with that, I'm going to stop recording in just a second here. I just wanted to thank everyone for coming out tonight, for sharing your thoughts and your energy, your wonderful questions, and many thanks again to our presenters. And we will see you at next month's open mic night, which is June 15th. Thank you, everyone.
Oh,